These tips will help you if you're new to English or already know some English. So the first thing you can do is read. Now reading is good because it will help you think in English and improve your vocabulary. Obviously improving your vocabulary is really good, but the main thing here is getting you to think in English. Because right now, you probably think of an idea in your native language, translate it in your head, and then say it. But if you think in English, you can just think of what you're going to say, then immediately say it, which is a lot easier. And it makes speaking a lot more fun, because it doesn't feel like a chore anymore. It feels like speaking becomes a lot easier. So how do we get you thinking in English? So when you read, you don't want to focus on the story or the characters, or specifically, you don't want to focus on the story or the characters or what they're doing. You just want to focus on hearing the sound of English in your mind. It sounds a bit weird, but when you start to be able to hear English in your mind, that's when you'll start to think in English. So when you're reading the book, you don't want to read it out loud. When you read it in your head and you start to think, and you start to hear the words in your mind, that's when it will become a lot easier. So don't focus on the story or characters or understanding the words. You just want to focus on pronouncing the words in your mind as you read. And you don't have to read fast at all. You can read it entirely at your own pace. You can read slow. If you're fast reader, you can read fast. But just focus on pronouncing the words in your mind. And in terms of if you feel like you don't understand the story fully, when you just write down any words that you're curious about. You don't have to write down every single word you don't know. But if there's a word like, oh, I want to know the meaning of that word, then feel free to write it down. And you can come and look it up later. But the point is, the main thing that we want you to do is just read the book and pronounce the words in your head as you go along. Because that will make the story, so much easier to understand. And when you start to think in English, then you wouldn't even have to worry about understanding the story. It will just come naturally to you. Now, in terms of what you should read, I'd recommend children's stories because they're simple to read and they have everyday vocabulary that you're going to be able to use in your day-to-day life. And the thing is, because the story is not going to be complex, so you'll be able to focus entirely on the pronunciation of the words in your head. And when you start to pronounce the words in your head, like I said, then you'll start to think in English, which will make everything so much better. If you don't know where to find the stories, I'll put some down below for free. The second thing that you can do is speak with other people who are also learning English. See, the reason that you don't speak English now is probably because you're concerned about your accent and you know that your grammar or vocabulary isn't 100% perfect. But those things aren't a big deal. They don't matter at all. As a native speaker, nobody cares if you have an accent or not. But if you're still scared about your accent or your grammar isn't perfect, which it's natural to be worried about, you don't have to feel bad about it. But where you can get rid of that fear is when you speak to other people who are also learning English. Because when you speak to people who have an accent and don't have perfect grammar, you start to realise that isn't a bad thing. And since that's not a bad thing, you naturally want to start speaking more English. And when you speak more English, then your English is going to improve. So you want to speak to other people who are also learning English. Then if you can find some in person or around you, that's really good. Or you can search for people online who are also learning English. Maybe if your friend is learning English, you can try to speak to them in English, or someone online, or you can find a group online. So the point is, when you speak to other people who are also learning English, you start to forget about your accent because everyone has an accent. And you forget that your grammar isn't 100% right because everyone's grammar is 100% right. So when you get used to the fact that you're not going to be perfect at English straight away, that's when you realise it's okay. And that's when you want to practice your English to get better. And when you're surrounded by people who are also learning, you're going to want to learn more because you want everyone to improve. And when you learn more, then everyone in the group will learn more. And everyone will slowly start to improve. So yeah, speak to other people who are also learning English because you'll stop being scared about your accent. You'll stop being scared about your grammar. And you'll improve your English so much faster than doing it alone. The third thing that you can do is listen to stories in English that you already know in your native language. Now this is similar to number one, but it will help you but when you listen to stories that you already know in your native language, you start to think in English. And again, when you think in English, it's so much easier to speak and it's so much easier to listen to other people when you're having a conversation. So when it comes to how you should listen, the one thing that I'd recommend is just don't focus on the words, don't focus on the story, focus on just hearing the sounds of English in your brain. It sounds weird because it is weird. And when you can get used to hearing English in your brain, that's when you already understand the story. And that's why it's good to listen to a story that you already know, because you won't be too worried on the story or what the characters are doing or what's happening in the story. You'll just be able to focus entirely on the words. Now, another way to help with this is to listen to a children's story that you already know. It can be a kid's story or a fairy tale, just something that's like a really simple story that you already know. If you already know the story and it's simple, you won't be too worried about the story or the characters. You'll just be able to focus completely on English. And you'll get a confidence boost as well, because you already know what the characters are saying and what the story's about. So you won't be trying too hard to follow the story. Just when you listen to it, try to focus entirely on how the words sound and how they're pronounced. You don't have to like watch the story, you can just listen to it on your own. But if you do want to look at the words, you can see the pronunciation. That'll help with a lot as well. But even if you just listen, just getting used to the sound of English in your mind and how certain words are pronounced in a British or American accent, it doesn't really matter. But you can just get used to the sound of how words are pronounced. That's what's going to help you improve a lot. And in terms of listening, like I said, it's a simple story that you already know in your language, and you want to focus on the sound of English. It doesn't have to be long at all, just 5 to 10 minutes a day. 10 minutes a day of listening to a story that you already know in your language, but you focus on the sound of English, and your English will improve by so much. So I've gone through 3 things in this video: speaking, reading, and listening. If you can do all of these daily, if you can read for 10 minutes a day, speak for 5 to 10 minutes a day, and listen for 10 minutes a day, then your English will improve by so much. Like I said, if you want some help with reading, I'll put some stories in my community below. It's free to join, and also with listening, I'll put it in my free community.